This is the Self-Taught or Not podcast with
Dylan Israel
and Eric Hanchett, where we teach you the do's and don'ts of software development from two software development professionals, one self-taught and one not.
We're just jumping into it, huh? Just jumping in. All right, so today, luckily everybody was on time because we are talking about time management and sort of how to stay on track really at the end of the day.
Yeah, it's kind of a fun topic. I think we, as developers, we all have ways to kind of get into the groove and how to manage our time. And it's really easy to get off track. I think I've seen almost every workplace I've been in, I've seen you walk up and down the aisles and half the developers are like checking their email and surfing the web, not really being that productive. And you kind of wonder, like, how do they get things done? And could they get more done if they were a little bit more better at time management?
Yeah. And it's not only like in the workplace, although to be honest, like the thing that would piss me off is when a business analyst or project manager or scrum master would come up and there'd be some news that happened at like 1 p.m. and they'd be like, "Did you see on Facebook?" It's like, no, because I've been working. Like, but time management as a developer and inside and outside of work is important. As we've filmed some of these podcasts, I think, you have to sort of find the time, and sometimes every once in a while you might hear a little bit of some Nickelodeon in the background or kids laughing because you are finding the time to film this within a very busy schedule of working and having a family.
Yeah, for total disclosure, I've been recording some of the episodes in my house, and my kids have been running around in the background. So if you guys ever hear that, you tweet us. Let us know. Tweet me at EricCH if you've ever heard that in what episode, and maybe I'll tweet you back.
Yeah. It's but that's sort of one thing that really pisses me off is when people just say I don't have the time, and it's like you kind of have to find the time, and that's an excuse that people use for a lot of things that suck, like going to the gym. I don't have the time to go to the gym, or I don't have the time to work out, and it's like you have to sort of at some point in your life make the adult decision about what you find important and sort of what you don't.
Yeah, I mean, that goes for everything in life. I mean, I've had friends that I've tried to hang out with who never have time to hang out anymore. I can make time for people that I enjoy and be with, and I have the time management skills, and I think that's a good learning trait to learn as well.
Yeah, one of the things that has helped me sort of outside of work, we all have side projects, and they're very time consuming, and I've had to give up some things like gaming. Like I own games, but for a very long time I didn't own a game console, and I didn't even own a TV. I had to eliminate distractions, and that was probably the largest one for me.
Yeah, I think as I grow older and older, I'm in the same wavelength as you. I just don't have enough time for video games any longer. It just sucks up too much of my time, unless it's with my son or daughter, and then we're playing together, and then that's a different.
It's so I've tried getting back into some of these things that they're supposed to just be leisure activities. They're not necessarily going to advance your career. They're not necessarily going to make you money. And the only thing that I can still do that I'm just not like feeling awful about after is going to the movies. But now when I sit down and I play video games, like 30 minutes in, I'm like, I just wasted 30 minutes. Now that we've sort of discussed some of the strategies that we've had to, focus on side projects and learning and progressing our career, time management at work is equally as important. So, I mean, those are the people cutting the checks.
Yeah, usually what happens with me is I have a routine that I try to do every day at work. And sometimes something happens and that routine gets broken, and then I'm not as productive that day. But I'm sure you have the same thing. Do you have, what's your routine at work, and what works for you to be productive?
Yeah. So, I mean, by and large, it depends on the work environment. I've only been at my current workplace for about 2 weeks at the time of filming this, but it's one of those items where I try to get in as early as possible schedule wise. Part of that is there's less people in the office, which means there's less distractions, which means there's going to be less dev support staff to ask me for clarification for things. Because not only will they come up to you while you're working, they'll also then schedule 3-4 meetings during the day to do the same thing. And so coming in early has been something that's been very helpful for me. And in terms of learning, one thing that I started doing very early on in my career was I watch or like read a blog or tutorial every single morning. So, various ones that I'm fans of and whatnot. But I will watch, and no more than 30 minutes, but around there, 15 to 30 minutes, and just to see what's out there, see what's going on, to educate myself.
Do you ever feel like if someone came in and saw you doing that, they'd be like, "Why aren't you working?" And you get weird about it?
No. That would, I understand where people come from that. But I look at it like this way, is that you are paying me to be a professional, and a professional software engineer is up to date. A professional software engineer gets better. So by me doing this, I'm increasing my skill set. I'm getting better. And, if you're at a workplace where they're not going to allow you 30 minutes a day to learn on a consistent basis, you need to get the hell out of there, as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah, I agree. And I think especially a lot of places I've worked at, when it's the slow times, when you're not getting a ton of new work coming in, or you're kind of waiting on someone in the back end, or waiting someone in the DevOps team, or you're kind of caught up and you're just slowly transitioning to the next feature or story, and it's not really due for many weeks, then I think that's also a great time to start looking up and doing research and kind of going through those YouTube videos of some cool programming technique you don't know about, looking up some blogs. I think that's a great time as well to do that, and I don't think there's anything wrong with that.
Yeah, and that's what's sort of crazy is, so like, we're talking about very realistic things. Oh, you're watching software tutorials or something that's related to your industry. I can't tell you how often I've walked by the floor of like customer support or any just devs that have Twitch up on one of their monitors while they're working, and it's just like, it blows my mind. It reminds me of this story. So my very first dev job, there was this girl who was an intern, and her dad had got her the job, knew the owner or whatnot, and she was like doing some sort of business analyst type role. And on one monitor she had whatever she was working on the other she had Netflix up watching some show, and the CEO comes in and is like, "What are you doing?" And she goes and starts breaking down the plot device throughout the story of like some terrible teen rom-com thing with like vampires or werewolves or whatever crap it was. And you could just see the shock on her face, on the CEO's face, as this is going on. And I don't know, it was an awkward moment for everybody, because you're a professional, and then you have this person who's maybe not so much, or somehow thinks it's okay. But it was definitely awkward, and it wasn't the only time it happened too. That's what was the craziest part about it.
I've seen people do. I've definitely seen people having like streaming audio and listening to audio. But man, if you're watching Netflix, that's one step too far. That's crazy. I did have one time, speaking of stories of people not doing their work. One time we had a night. This was a while back. We had a meeting, like a dinner, with a bunch of different team members, and some of those team members end up going out afterwards. And I went home. So I come in the next day, and one guy, he literally walks into our office about a half hour late. But I'm not one of those guys that have a stopwatch and watch everybody in the office and what time they come in. I try to think, as long as you come in and do your job, I don't care if you come in 20 minutes late or an hour late, because, we all get work done. But today was a little different, because he came in, he sat down, and then 10 minutes later, I literally heard snoring coming from his desk. And the guy was just out. He was just out, like head in arms, laying down, slumped over on his desk, sleeping right next to his keyboard. I'm like, and he was loud too. And everybody in all the cubicles were like, "What is that sound?" And there's this dude And then I think he eventually woke up, or like, should we wake him up? Should we not wake him up? I don't know. Our boss did end up walking by, and he ended up waking up that way. So
It's sort of crazy to think what, sometimes, people say, a lot of things are just common sense, but like, then you hear about things like this and you're like, all right, I guess, I guess, like, oh my goodness. So, managing your time at work is one of those things that's sort of really hard. And, one question that you always get when you get interviewed is how much time do you spend writing code? And it's sort of one of those questions. They want to find out how many meetings you're in and if your job actually involves writing down code, because like sometimes people sort of BS and on their resumes and whatnot. So meetings have been such a, for the most part, a time waster of at least the meetings I've been in. I would say about 1 in 4 meetings I actually have to go to that have any relevance to me. Has that been sort of your experience in the past?
yeah, definitely. You get into the routine of just lots of meetings, and some of them deal with you, some of them don't. Um, I don't mind too much the meetings. I always think, like, depends on if I'm in the middle of a flow. Like if I'm in this programming project, and for those developers out there, you know how that feels. You're like, time just flies by. You're in the keyboard, you're typing away. You look at the clock, it's 9 a.m. Next time you look at the clock, it's like noon. It's already lunchtime, and you're like, gosh, I don't want to stop. Those meetings are awful. In fact, we actually have discussed, like, we've discussed like certain days where we have no meetings. Like there's like a working Wednesday where you have no meetings, just because everybody didn't want to get stopped in the flow of work and having to get interrupted.
Yeah, that'd be fantastic. One thing that I've started doing is I just leave them now. So it's like, if like within 5 minutes, if it's apparent that I don't really need to be here, I'll just leave. And it's really easy digitally because a lot of meetings take place online. You just dip out of the call. Oftentimes it takes a little bit more gusto when you're in person. Be like, I don't really think I need to be here. I'm going to go and use my time elsewhere and get the hell out of it. Although at that point you've been broken out of the flow, unfortunately.
Yeah, that's probably a good tip. If you find out somewhere in the beginning of the meeting you're not supposed to be there, it's okay to leave. I know that I've done that before too.
Yeah, it's definitely uncomfortable when you're just getting going and getting your career started, without a doubt. But it's it's nature of the beast. One thing that sort of the cliche of doing good time management is the Pomodoro Technique as well.
Mm-hmm.
Is this something that you've used? I'm not really a fan of it, but
yeah. So I've done it off and on for a few years. So kind of going back to my schedule, usually in the morning, I work on a project. Let me rephrase that. In the first part of the day, I'm like checking emails. I'm looking over what I want to do that day. I look at any pull requests that came in the day before that I missed, anything I need to merge. I check Slack. You can get so wrapped up in Slack. There's always like a conversation. I'm also in like 20 different channels. So I'm always like looking at 20 different channels and like all the conversations that I missed the day before. And I got to kind of just skim through them to see if anything relates to me. So that takes a bunch of time. And then usually that goes right into the stand-up that we have every day. And if you're not familiar with the stand-up, it's usually 5 minutes per person. You kind of tell them what you did yesterday, what you're going to do today, if you're blocked in anything. Then I might even take a break after that and like take a quick walk, get some like energy out. And then when I'm finally ready to code, I usually set up my environment and I kind of deep dive. And I've gone back and forth. Sometimes, usually the way Pomodoro Technique works is you have, I want to say 20 minutes. I can't remember what the Pomodoro timer is now. It stops at 20 or 30. Let me check it. Take a look.
I think it's a matter of preference. So like, I mean, I could be mistaken, but I believe it's like bare minimum 15 and it can go up to an hour.
Yes. Yeah. So I used to use this timer that would just do it at 25 minutes. And that seemed like it would be a little too low for me. So the way it works is you work for 25 minutes, you set a timer. It's usually, like Dylan said, maybe 15 minutes up to an hour. You work till that timer hits, and then you take like a 15-minute break, and then you do another 25 minutes or up to whatever timer is, and then you take like a half hour break, and then you kind of do it again. So the breaks kind of depend on you. Some people like a 5-minute break between between the Pomodoro times. Some people want a longer break. Usually, though, after you do 2 or 3 at a time, you take a longer break, like a half hour or sometimes even longer. So then you can kind of estimate your time by how many Pomodoros you do a day. So you could say, well, I did 4 Pomodoros a day, and that was a good day for me. So that would be whatever your timer is. Let's assume most people use 25 minutes. Then you got 4 25-minute blocks done. And incredibly, for some people, this is pretty surprising. Most developers, we probably only get 4 to 6 hours of real work done a day, and the rest of the time is breaks and meetings and code reviews and other like things that aren't like specific work stuff. So if you can get, a lot of times people say if you can get in 4 to 6 Pomodoros a day, that's really good, because that's 4 to 6 super concentrated hours, or 4 to 6 25-minute increments of really concentrated work.
Yeah, I know as a junior developer that the senior developer, the tech lead rather, started doing this just so I stopped asking him questions every minute. And so he'd wait until my Pomodoro's over. I see that my issue with it is that 25 minutes isn't long enough for me. Like, I'm a degenerate. I just like to code until I don't want to do it anymore, and then I take a break. That's sort of how I like to do it. Which so it's also I the thing I didn't like about it, and this is everyone has their own sort of success ways to succeed in time management and whatnot, was that I didn't like there's good stopping points when you're working on applications, and having a time associated with it, you may not be at a good stopping point one way or the other. And so that was the only thing that I sort of disliked about it. But it's better than not having any sort of technique at all, I guess.
Yeah, it's not definitely for everyone. I had that problem too. Sometimes you'll be really into it for like 25 minutes, and then when you go back and then you have to take that break, you're like, okay, now what am I going to do for 5 minutes? Like, I'm really into this. I want to go right back into it. So then in that case, you would have to increase the time until it makes more sense. What I do now is I have kind of abandoned the Pomodoro technique. Although every now and then I'm like, I should do it again. And as soon as I have that time block, I just get right into the programming, and I try to eliminate distractions. It's really hard. Sometimes I like checking my phone. I'm always like getting texts and alerts on my phone. So sometimes I just have to put my phone out of reach. So that way, when I'm programming, I don't get distracted by it. On Slack, I turn myself to away. So that way I don't get messages on Slack that can interrupt my flow. Sometimes I just work like that though. Sometimes I just work with distractions. I might work like for 15 minutes, like check my phone, check Slack, get back to work. And I've realized those days I do that aren't as productive as the days where I'm like in the zone and working.
Yeah, phone distractions can definitely be something that can be overcome, and like it's natural. Like, all of us want to check our phones for the most part. We're all sort of guilty of that. And one way that I've sort of overcame it with work distractions is I don't actually put email or any chat clients on my phone. I'll have it on my computer. But if you want to get a hold of me, and that way I also don't check it in meetings and whatever else I'm doing, you have to physically call me. And no one calls anyone in 2019, so you don't get bothered. I used to, before I sort of just refused to install anything, and I used to actually take my phone, put it on silent, and physically put it in my backpack and take it with me when I go to lunch. That's about it.
That's pretty smart. Yeah, definitely. I could see that making a lot of sense.
Yeah, it's a little extreme, and some people might feel uncomfortable doing it, but I've sort of found that kind of you have to be extreme. You like you know what I mean? Getting up and excusing yourself from a meeting, just putting yourself on silent. You just sort of have to take these somewhat extreme stances to be able to get your work done a lot of times. Because one thing I try to tell people is that you have to understand developers have a lot of the answers. When the project manager needs to know what's going on with the project, they're going to ask the developer about the state of the application. When the scrum master is confused about how the sprint's going, they're going to ask the developers to figure out why. When the business analyst can't get the requirements from the product owner and needs some clarification, it's the developers who have to explain it to them. When the QA needs to test some stuff and they don't fully understand it because the business analyst didn't understand it and they didn't write a proper ticket, they're going to go ask the developers what it's supposed to do. And, sometimes you have to just sort of be extreme to stop that. Not that you don't want to be helpful, but you want to be helpful on your own time.
Do you say that? Yeah. So you ignore those until you get to a good stopping point?
I try to. It's one of those things where you can only do so much, right? When you all work in the office together and all it takes is for somebody to come up to you. And nowadays we all work in open office environments, right? No one really has their own office. If the door was closed, they come in. But when you work in the same room, people just walk right up. Hey, what's this ticket supposed to do? Why isn't this working? Are we gonna have this out tomorrow? And that not only breaks up your flow, but it and then it takes you time to ramp back up. But it takes time, and good stopping points, I think, for a developer are one of the most crucial things to having good time management.
A while back, I was working in a project with 2 remote developers, and we were all on Slack, and every day we were chatting like, hey, we need to get this done, and we need to get this done. And then I would be testing something, I would find a bug, and I'd be like, hey, Jim, I just found a bug here. And I would type it out. And the remote developer one day kind of sent me a private message like, hey, man, I can't get my work done because there's too much chat happening and I'm getting too many interruptions. So would you mind if every time you find any kind of problem with the app, just put a bug in our bug tracking system? You don't have to message me or tell everybody about it. And, between these times, I'm going to be working and I'm just going to kind of be less active on the chat channel between all the developers. And at first I was like, ooh, this kind of feels kind of weird. I mean, did I push him too much? But then I realized he's exactly right. There's 3 of it. There was only 3 or 4 developers in this channel, but it was a private channel on Slack. Not even a channel, a private message on Slack. So every time we sent a message, it would pop in all of our things. And I was I was fine with it. But then I realized, yeah, I'm probably, this guy doesn't work like that. It's probably super distracting. And especially when you bring up problems, no one likes to hear some of their code broke or something. And maybe the proper place isn't to put it on a Slack channel. That maybe it's better to do it either as a bug request. So it took me a little while, but then I realized, yep, that's he's getting a lot distracted. Let's change our process and how we deal with things.
Yeah, and sometimes you just have to leave those channels. I've been in a very similar situation where we try to implement something like that, but then the Scrum Master and BA didn't like that they weren't what they felt like was in the loop, and so then they're like, all right, go back to that channel. And then you just gotta leave. You just that's what I did. I was like, oh, cool. We got less messages, and then it popped back up a week later. You're like, I'm just gonna bounce out. They can message me directly.
Yep.
All right. Is there? I think we covered pretty much everything. Anything else you wanted to add, Eric?
No, I know. The only thing I would ask from you, Dylan, is there anything else in your routine? You kind of mentioned a little bit about the beginning of your day and then getting into coding, but is there other things that you do every day that kind of help with your workflow?
Other than a good, solid learning and trying to just, I don't want to say stay away from people, but just try and make sure that I interact with people on my own time and leave meetings and find good stopping points. I really am a strong believer of good stopping points in the code and in the application. I just try to be aware of when I have meetings. And so like if I have a meeting in 30 minutes, I just hit a good stopping point, I'll take a break for 30 minutes and I'll go answer those emails. I'll go do all that administrative crap that comes along with being a developer. Besides that, just making sure that outside of work, I have my good time management so that I am getting better and progressing my career. And, I've had to have conversations with, my manager about how I can have better time management as well, as crazy as that sounds, just because of all the craziness going on. But yeah, not, I don't think anything out of the norm.
Two other things that just came to mind before we wrap this up. One is there's tons of like time management books and you can probably find a ton of videos online about this and TED Talks. One thing that I found that helped me, there's two different ways. There's one, they call it, I just Googled it. It's called Eat the Frog. And so what they mean by that is when you start your day, you try to take like one or two really important tasks and try to get them done first. And then that way you kind of have that feeling of accomplishment the rest of the day and that you've kind of tackled something major every morning, and then that would help you through the day. I've also heard another thing that I've done is I'll look at my priority list for the day when I'm starting to work, and I'll try to find one or two really easy things to get done, which kind of is the opposite, but I think this works for some people. So like maybe I'll look at a few bugs. Maybe a bug popped up from the day before and I know I can fix it in 5 minutes. So I'll like really quickly fix it, push up a pull request, and just by kind of getting one thing done, I can then, it kind of sets me in the right mindset to keep working the rest of the day and start working on the next things. And I'm also one of those guys too that like checking things off my checklist. So I don't do this every day, but sometimes I'll make a little checklist of everything I need to do. And then I'll just manually check that off throughout the day of things I want to do. And then sometimes if I'm really feeling ambitious, I'll the night before or right before I leave, I'll make some new requirements that I want to get done the next day.
Yeah, one thing that came to mind after you said that is notoriously I've had teams that when you are like depending on what you're following, you might do product backlog refinement or grooming, where you're pointing stories, talking about acceptance criteria, figuring out. I have had teams where in an hour you get one or two stories done because everyone wants to share their opinion. Everyone wants to argue about details that don't even really need to be discussed. And one thing that we've done I've done at several companies now, is you bring in literally one of those little timers like that you would have, little sand timers, and flip it. And I think there's about 90 seconds or 3 minutes in it. I'm not quite sure. And at the end of it, we would say, okay, we just ran out of time. Do we have enough to move forward with the story or not? But we're moving on. So like we'd say, all right, we didn't get this. We're not comfortable to point it, or maybe we are, and we'll point it because we all understand what is being asked. And if we're not, we're going to come back to it because we're moving on to something else. That was something that really saved us from doing a ton of that.
Yeah, that works too. Yeah, I've been in, that reminds me of some backlog grooming sessions I've been a part of. And some companies, the backlog grooming sessions, only like your manager and project management will be inside of. Like they don't, like the developers don't get involved until the backlog grooming is done. And then the developers come in and then put the story points on. So I've been involved both ways. It sounds like if you kind of get more people and the developers in, maybe there's more discussion. I don't know.
Yeah. A lot of it is, I think as developers, we naturally want to share our opinion quite a bit as, as two people doing a podcast right now. But I know that was one of the things is we all wanted to give our input, make sure we understood, hey, did you consider this? Did you consider that? And to me, a lot of times, I think as long as you err on the side of caution with estimates and you can deliver something at that time or early and sometimes a little later, that's fine. But I would be okay with maybe. So we've also done representatives where on larger teams, at the time there was 8 team members, of actual devs on a single team. And so what we would do is we would send for each grooming session one back end, one services, and we would rotate. And so they would go and they would be the people who would essentially vote on it. And that way we're not taking 8 developers' time with the BA and the Scrum Master and the PO. Instead, we're just taking 2 developers' time, and the other 6 can continue working.
Yeah, that works too.
Yeah. All right. On the there it goes. On that note, I think we've exhausted the time management and just being smart with your time sort of thing. As always, let us know in our Code Tech and Caffeine Facebook group your time management techniques, and maybe we'll share them in an upcoming podcast. Hey guys, thanks for watching. If you want to find more about what I'm up to, go to dylanisrael.com.
And if you want to know what I'm up to, you can check out my website at eric.video. If you haven't already, please leave us a 5-star review on iTunes. It really helps us out. And if you do, you might even be featured on our next episode. Don't forget to check out the website at selftaughtornot.com. From there, you can sign up for a mailing list where we give away free courses and a bunch of cool stuff. And we'll also let you know when the next episode comes out. And finally, if you didn't know, we have a Facebook group. It's called Code, Tech, and Caffeine. We have over 10,000 members, and you can find the link at selftaughtornot.com. So come join us. We have tons of developers willing to help you guys, mentor you guys. Check it out. Just make sure you go to selftaughtornot.com and check out the Code, Tech, and Caffeine link. Thanks, and take care.